In this episode of the Encounter Report, 4 brave wizards battle insurmountable odds in Ni no Kuni Wrath of the White Witch. Among them is Axelrod, me, who played the game for the second time and had a leg up on the competition. The others include Crayson and Background Guy 02, who are playing the PlayStation 3 version. And lastly, Ghost VTS, who is playing the remastered version. So with that information out in the open, the question the 4 of us have come to answer is, flippin' heck man, how many encounters is too many? To start everything off, we'll dive into battle types and I'll just start with the elephants in the room. Ghost VTS had the most random encounters out of everyone, but didn't have the highest time either. On average, he spent 39 seconds in random encounters, and this is our first glimpse into the remastered version. The transitions in and out of battles were shorter, and there was also a nice DLC Griffin familiar that trivialized many fights. The other elephant is Background Guy 02's boss time, which isn't that far off from matching the combined boss times of Crayson, Ghost VTS, and myself. On average, he spent 10 minutes 30 seconds in boss fights, and it was partly due to his lack of interest in side quests, but also some very unfortunate metamorphosis moments in his familiars. Without a doubt, Background Guy 02 struggled the most out of all of us. Next up are the battle locations, or the general areas encounters took place in the game. It's relatively even across the board, although it is worth pointing out that excluding Background Guy 02, everyone was very interested in exploration and revisiting old areas. The world map times and total encounters certainly illustrate as much. Let's also not let it slide when it comes to the town encounters. For the run percent in particular, we get to see a pretty clear divide. Some people ran away from innocent town folk, and some people murdered them. The combat types help tell a story of our trials and tribulations. Despite some truly challenging moments in the game, everyone's deaths were quite low despite the large disparities in total encounters. And on top of that, Crayson only ran from 13 total encounters. Wait, that can't be right. Is the formula dropping 2 zeros at the end? Anyway, I think what fascinates me the most here is that if you swapped Ghost VTS and Background Guy 02's fight times, it would look normal, despite both players playing the game blind and both players taking a similar amount of time to beat the game. There was such a large gap when it comes to their playstyles and of course, the remastered version versus the original. To round out the categories are encounter subtypes. This is where you can see what in the world everyone was doing with their extra time, and I think we should pay special note to Background Guy 02's grinding numbers. Despite everyone else opting to grind for something, while also engaging in many side quest activities, he chose to stick to his guns. Crayson also opted for very little grinding, probably due to the fact that he never discovered Tokos. In JRPGs, we're often presented with an easy solution of grinding, and in some cases, it's absolutely required. It was fascinating to me to witness Background Guy 02's approach because he was adamant about grinding not being needed. While he was right in the end, the struggles he had to endure certainly felt self-inflicted even if that wasn't the case. For notable locations, I should note that some regions, such as North and South Summerlands, as well as some of Automnia, were lumped into a single location for each area. As an example, the desert area outside Alba Moon and the beaches of Castaway Cove would be considered South Summerlands. And speaking of South Summerlands, this was the location everyone had the most encounters at. 30% of all grinding I did was here, trying to catch the elusive Dinoceros, while the Ghost VTS also shared in my pain, clocking in 31% total grind percentage for the same familiar. Ghost VTS also experienced 40% of his total deaths in this region. The Ivory Tower, which is the final dungeon of the game, certainly has a story to tell. Despite being a relatively innocuous dungeon, it still managed to be a pain in the butt. For those of us that played the PlayStation 3 version, I had the lowest encounter time despite having the most encounters fought. I felt very strong in the dungeon, having grinded my Dinoceros to peak performance while also having powerful defensive familiars on Swain and Esther. Unfortunately, the final boss proved quite challenging for me, causing me to attempt it a total of 3 times before defeating it. Crayson somehow found himself having the least amount of encounters. He deftly avoided as many as he could and had very little resistance, which is quite curious. All things considered, Crayson had the most standard of all familiar compositions. None of them were rare, and for the most part, were all familiars he acquired on the Summerlands continent at the beginning of the game. And yet, They were all more than enough for him to beat the final boss in one attempt. Background Guy 02 found himself in a fortunate position upon his arrival in the Ivory Tower. Having struggled since the Glittering Grotto, he found his familiars constantly one-shot and the party AI severely holding back his success. But then, as if the JRPG gods heard his prayers, he encountered 2 fully evolved Tokos and his levels soared through the roof. Suddenly, the encounters provided him a little breathing room. He too defeated the final boss in one attempt, but with the most unorthodox party composition I've ever seen. On the victory screen, Oliver had 3 familiars, Esther had 1 familiar, and Marcuson had 2 familiars. That's one way to improve the party AI. Lastly, Ghost VTS established his dominance with a remastered version. Having done a large amount of side quests, grinding, and having his super overpowered Griffin familiar, it felt as though his party composition was unstoppable. He was the only person to not die in the final dungeon and also spent the least amount of time in it. He approached the final boss and basically killed it in his sleep. It died so fast, he could have played his midstream Erdles while his party members killed the boss for him. For the last hurrah, here are the combined stats. It's truly fascinating to see that despite the different circumstances we all had with the game, being that it was my second time playing, Grayson and Background Guy 02 playing the PlayStation 3 version, and Ghost VTS playing the remastered, there's similarities and big differences between all of us. Ghost VTS and myself grinded the most and ended up having lower encounter times. Grayson played the game the longest, and yet only 24% of his playthrough was encounters, which is strangely similar to Ghost VTS as well. Background Guy 02 and myself have the highest percentage of time encounters took, but Background Guy 02 also had the least amount of encounters on top of the most amount of time spent in encounters by a large margin. Coincidentally, he also doesn't end the game at the lowest level, despite struggling so much to gain a foothold in the last third of the game. And that's a wrap for the Ni no Kuni Wrath of the White Witch encounter report. Please visit everyone's Twitch and YouTube channels and consider giving them a follow or subscription to show some support. With Ni no Kuni Wrath of the White Witch conquered, I can safely say that I've seen this game in a new light. Thanks for watching, appreciate it, see you on the next video.